Okay, it's time to call this July 16th special budget workshop and special call meeting to order. Madam Secretary, do we have a quorum?
Mr. Contreras?
Present.
Ms. Guanajuato Webb?
Present.
Mr. Mesa?
Here.
Mr. Overfelt? Mrs. Sanders?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Present.
And myself. Yes, sir, we have a quorum.
Let the record show that we do have a quorum and that this meeting has been duly called in accordance with the Texas Texas Government Code Chapter 551, Texas Open Meetings Act. We will all do opening exercise. We please stand and take a few moments for personal reflection, and then we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, and welcome to our meeting. First item that we have on our agenda is our budget workshop. We will have health insurance being item 3A, Brown & Brown, Lone Star Insurance Services. Do we have representatives from Brown & Brown?
Good evening, President Mesa and board members. Today we have Brown & Brown who will provide us with an update on insurance.
All right, good evening. We have met before. My name is Greg Caldaway. I work for Brown & Brown. We work with you consulting on your employee benefits and specifically this evening for your health plan. Okay, so we're going to talk this evening primarily about what our recommendation is for funding your health plan going forward starting in 2019 in consultation with the administration and where we think that ought to go. So before we get to that, though, I know we have several new board members. Some of you don't deal with this on a daily basis, so we thought we would do a very, very quick refresher about your self-funded plan or any self-funded health plan, how they work, the components of them, so that'll make the funding discussion make a bit more sense if you're not familiar. So self-funding is the vast majority of the health plans in this country are self-funded as opposed to a fully insured, I go to Blue Cross or I go to United Healthcare and buy insurance. Most plans of size over 500 employees or more are in fact self-funded in this country. But we need to define the term. So fully insured means that we have fully transferred risk for a health plan to an insurance company. That full premium is due every month. You have no fluctuation in any liability. It's all handled by the insurance company. It's easily fixed and budgeted. The insurance company holds all the reserves of that health plan. You have no claim on any reserves or any good claims experience. You do have state mandates and taxes, and they provide everything for implementation. They provide a lot of the regulatory services within the cost of that plan. And they are subject to minimum loss ratio rules, which is part of the Affordable Care Act, which means that if they, as in an aggregate for their entire company, spend less than a certain percentage on claims, they have to refund those dollars back to their customers. That doesn't happen anymore. It happened in the early days of the Affordable Care Act. We do not see that happening anymore. But these are the pieces of that dollar that you're sending to Blue Cross or United Healthcare or Aetna. So obviously there are dollars to pay the claims with, and there are dollars for their reserves. There's profit and risk charges. There is their administration expense of administering the claims and billing and data processing, their network administration or network expenses. And I don't mean their computer network, I mean their network of doctors and hospitals that they maintain, and just overall operation and acquisition expenses. So all of those components are wrapped around that dollar that you might send to an insurance company. And what I want to show you is that your self-funded plan has all of those same components. You just get to see them. They are broken apart. You see the component parts, and we can select vendors for each one of those things independently. So self-funded plan means that as the employer, we've accepted the risk and responsibility for this benefit plan, for the health insurance plan. You, as a district, establish, hold those reserves. You own them, they belong to you. You determine what benefits are to be offered. If we want to tweak some benefit, we have the ability to do that in a self-funded plan. We don't have to ask anybody. We can just amend the plan to do so. The employer is the fiduciary of the plan, and state mandates and most taxes do not apply. There are some federal taxes under the ACA which do apply, but not very many. No minimum loss ratio rules, and it's basically made up of two things, what we call administration or fixed cost. That's an amount that we're going to pay some vendor, a third-party administrator, whoever's administering the plan for us. They're going to charge us a fee to administer this plan, do the eligibility, do the customer service, do the proper plan documents, maintain the network of providers, pharmacy benefit management fees, and importantly, stop-loss insurance. So that's all wrapped up in fixed costs. That's what we pay on a monthly basis. It's a relatively small component of the total picture. The big cost, as you might expect, is the claims, the actual claims that are incurred, submitted, and paid on behalf of your employees. But claims can be made up of three things. One, the actual current claims, current processed and paid. Runoff claims, which can happen when an employer determines they no longer want to be self-funded, and there are claims that are incurred prior to the termination of that plan that are paid later, and those are the responsibility of the employer. So we reserve dollars for that possibility. So several concerns some people have. What if I had a bunch of really large claims in a given year? That could be a concern to some. What if I just had overall high utilization? My funding is not, my expenses are not always the same every month. They can vary dramatically. And the district has a little more responsibility from the administration side to administer and oversee that plan. And finally, some employees feel that it's less than. We do not agree with that perception, but there is some perception out there that it's less than a Blue Cross plan or an Aetna plan. So the key to making a self-funded plan work is stop-loss insurance, because this is what is limiting the risk to make it viable for small, relatively small employers to self-fund their health plan. And there are two kinds of stop-loss insurance that you have today and that we will certainly recommend you continue to purchase. Specific stop loss says that if any one employee that is covered in your plan exceeds a dollar level, that the insurance company will reimburse the district for any amount over that level. Depends on the size of the group, depends on the risk tolerance of that employer. That stop loss level could be $20,000, $50,000, $100,000, $500,000, $600,000. And the group has retained the risk below that number. We have transferred the risk above that number to an insurance company. That's what makes these plans viable, is that we have capped our risk on any one catastrophic claimant. Aggregate stop loss is exactly what its name suggests. In aggregate, we can limit the liability of the district to a number for the year. So we can tell Dr. Rios, this is your worst case scenario to budget for this year. And we can do that because we have aggregate stop loss, which sets those limits for us. And obviously, we pay a premium to the insurance company for these coverages, but they are absolutely necessary, and they are the thing that allows employers to, in fact, self-fund their plans. Because otherwise, you have unlimited risk, you have unlimited potential to pay claims, and even the largest employers would not choose to do that, I don't think. So stop-loss insurance, incredibly important. Just one note on the aggregate, we can limit that down to a monthly basis, or we can completely smooth out your cash flows. So that's an important component as well. Some employers choose to do that, some don't. So here's an example of how an employee that had a $225,000 claim, if that employer had a $100,000 stop loss, here's how that would look. You would pay the first $100,000 in claims through your TPA. The insurance company would pay the amount over that, or $125,000, and then the amount that would apply towards your aggregate or your annual liability is the $100,000 that you, in fact, did pay. So it's pretty simple, but not everybody knows how that works. So there's a lot of advantages to being self-funded. We support it as consultants and advisors. It gives you total flexibility in plan design. The state mandates don't apply. We can do innovative ideas. There's new things we can do through a self-funded plan that you simply cannot do through a fully insured plan. We can choose how we want to, what risk we want to take, what we want to pass on to an insurance company. Even insurance companies have stop loss. They call it a pooling level. And so internally, they have those same mechanisms. We can control the monthly cash flow. There are tax-saving advantages just from premium tax, no retention for the corporate, for the big Mother Aetna or United Healthcare. The administration is quite often less expensive under a self-funded plan, and we see better service, typically from our administrators, than we do from insurance companies. And importantly, when the claims experience is favorable, you get to retain every dollar of that favorable claims experience. So, and lastly, services that we need could be someone to administer the claims, the network of doctors and hospitals, the pharmacy management company. We can deploy best in class in all of those various areas, as opposed to them being bundled all up together with one thing like an insurance company. So we think there's a lot of advantages. Again, cash flow, you hold your own reserves, there's no margin for the insurance companies, and obviously there's some disadvantages as well. So you do assume some risk. You could have some short-term cash flow issues, which we can deal with through the insurance company, and you are ultimately the fiduciary for the plan. So I know that was very fast, but I wanted to kind of briefly go over how a self-funded plan works. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has at this point.
I do have a question. The best case scenario would be where the stop loss would remain flat throughout the year, and we know that doesn't happen. But for us, especially for me, it's hard to understand, like from one year to the next, how we see the expenses triple in some areas. And sometimes we question, like, is that real that they charge us 3 times as much? And it's hard to, unless you spend time on that one item alone, to determine what caused that expense to be tripled in one year from the previous year.
Right.
And it all has to do with the stop loss area. I don't know if, Dr. Rios, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, sir. And we were talking a whole lot about stop loss before we came down here, so we apologize for being late. From one year to the next, I was sharing with the consultants that we saw the increases in the rates for stop loss go up dramatically. And that is one of the things that was, or one of the fixed costs that was making the insurance for this year so difficult to fully fund. So we've engaged in the discussions as to what it's going to be for this coming year. They're going to go back and review how many individuals exceeded we're at 600,000 for stop loss. How many have exceeded that to where we would get refunded? But more importantly, how many claimants have exceeded the previous stop loss rate that we had, Ms. Valdez, I believe it was 300,000? 450? 250. But because it's such a moving target from one year to the next, and the best that we can do is have them analyze the data and give us a good estimate. They believe that 600,000 is too high. We believe that it was the only affordable thing we could do to make the plan work this year. So they're going to review the data for the last 2 years, this year and last year, and then we'll be able to bring back a recommendation as to what we're going to set the stop loss at this year. I don't believe 250,000 is a good rate. I think it's too low. 600,000, I would agree that it's high, but we need real data, and hopefully the RFP will come back with a favorable rate.
Okay. Thank you for the response. And the other area that I had a question on is, we look at a detail and it says that we can negotiate some of those prices that are being charged to our employees. And, again, that's an area that I'm not familiar with health insurance and policies regarding health insurance, but how is it that we can negotiate?
Do you want to deal with that?
Well, we can't negotiate, but TML, who's our third-party administrator, and United Healthcare, they can negotiate on our behalf. They're the ones that have to do the negotiating. Now, the reality is that over the last couple months, Ms. Valdez, Ms. English, Ms. Garcia, and myself have sat with the hospital administrators to talk about a better rate. But us talking is just us encouraging them to work with TML to set a better rate so that the plan could be more affordable, at least to the district. But really, it's not the district. It's those third-party administrators that should be doing the negotiating.
Okay. That helps me understand a little bit better. But whatever we need to do to lower the cost to our employees is beneficial for everyone here.
Yes,
I believe Mr. Contreras had a question.
Yes, sir. It's going back to the stop loss. Like you said, Dr. Rios, 200, 250,000 is too low, 600 is too high. However, what were the triggers that caused us, to be to exceed the amount that's going to be reimbursed? And those triggers, are they because usually it's a group of people that triggers that. Are they still there? I mean, have they retired? I mean, what, because usually, and unfortunately, that's what happens.
Well, unfortunately, the
And-
triggers, you're right, it is individual claims that have exceeded a certain dollar amount. But the triggers are usually lasered, which means they're not covered. And that's why it was so difficult for me to understand why the premiums for stop loss were increasing so much when those triggers that were causing it were not going to be covered in the stop loss. They were saying, we're going to cover everybody else except these 3 or 4 individual cases that we know are going to exceed that amount. And that just seems like a one-sided deal. You know, we're taking all the known risks, and you guys are taking all the money.
Yeah.
But again, they're going to do an RFP on our behalf, and hopefully the rates will be a lot more affordable to where we can decrease the stop loss rate.
Okay, and when you identify those triggers, is there anything we can do to maybe get those covered? The ones that,
That would be them negotiating with whoever submits the RFP, but that's on the consultants.
And to be clear, those employees are in fact covered. They have not been, when they have a laser, that does not mean that employee is not getting services, that employee is not being covered by the plan. It's simply a determination of who's going to pay for it, the district or the stop loss carrier. So I didn't want that misconception out there. Okay.
thank you, sir.
Any other questions?
Okay, what I'm going to put up on the screen, we've been working with your team to, if I can get this up, there we go. There we go. So our task at this point for this meeting is to come to you with some recommendations about how to fund your plan. I'll let you help me out.
Just to make it.
Okay, so, and because it is self-funded, we get to make those determinations, and we get to determine who's going to pay what, how much are the employees going to pay, how much is the district going to pay, and how much do we think we're going to need, because we do not know what the cost is going to be for 2019 as we stand here today, and we understand that these budgets have to be established, and we have to make some projections. So that's what we have done, and we've done it based on the historical data. And if we drop down to this, I'm not operating this properly. Drop down to this first table. This is a very broad overview of what's gone on for about the past 33 months. So just to kind of orient you to this table, when I talk about plan year, I'm talking about September 1 through August 31. So September 1 of 2015 through August 31 of 2016. When I say plan revenue, I'm talking about all the dollars that are available from either district or employee contributions out of their paycheck towards the plan. So it's all revenue dollars that are going into the plan. So plan expenses includes stop loss, administration services, claims, all expenses associated with your health plan. Obviously, surplus and deficit are self-explanatory. So 2015, 2016, plan revenue of 8.6 million, plan expenses just over 8.7. So we had a deficit in that year of $135,857. So not horrible, but not great. So starting in 2016, our plan revenue went up to $9,040,000. Plan expenses, however, escalated to $10,924,000. So $1.8 million deficit for that plan year. Those dollars come they have to be paid. Those come from the district in some way. And I think that is maybe the issue that has spurred everybody to make some adjustments, to review this a little more carefully. So far, September 1 through May 31 of this year, you guys are doing very, very well. We're projecting through that date a surplus of $1.2 million. So that's excellent. So that's the facts. That's what we know. And so from that, we have, and from a whole bunch of other very specific data, we have taken to do projections for you going forward. So the question is, how do we fund this insurance plan starting January 1 of 2019?
Sorry, sir. I just want to make sure everybody's clear. Can you go back to the slide that shows the 1.2?
Yes, sir.
Is that the one you're on now?
Yes.
Right. Yes, right there. I just want to be clear that for the current plan year, it's showing a 1.2 surplus, but the 7.6 million there, that only shows what we've contributed today between the district's contribution and then what the employees pay for spouse and for family and children. But over the whole district, over the whole plan year, the total contribution or the whole revenue would be 11.4 million.
Right.
So this year, it is an increase of almost about $2.3 million more than the previous year. That's why we're showing a surplus. It's not that altogether expenses have come down. It's because of a much more substantial district contribution.
Correct.
And some increases on the family and employee side. Yeah.
Absolutely true.
Yeah, thank you for going back to there. So your planned revenue for the full year is going to be 11.4.
Yes, sir.
And your planned expenses would be?
We're projecting them at about 10.2.
Correct. 10.2 is your projection.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, so the question then becomes, how do we fund the plan? And we just run a couple of scenarios to show you what it could look like. We will fine-tune this, but we wanted to give you some broad overviews. So we are projecting, as Dr. Rios suggested, about $10.7 million in plan expenses for the next plan year. If we went backwards to that 2016-2017 funding arrangement, which was one concept that was talked about, before the district kicked in a bunch more money, we would be projecting a revenue of approximately 8.7, another $1.9 million deficit. So obviously that's not feasible, but we wanted to kind of demonstrate it and show you what it looked like on paper. Leaving your current funding levels exactly where they are, as Dr. Rios suggested, would generate about $11.4 million. We're projecting expenses of 10.7. That would generate a deficit for the next plan year, or I mean a surplus, of $710,000. So that's a viable alternative, given everything else we know. However, we believe, we don't know this yet until we've completed the RFP, we have all the quotes, but we believe at this point that your maximum liability under the stop-loss contract, your fixed cost and your maximum liability to pay claims will be about $12.2 million next year. If we fund to that amount, and we are fortunate and our expenses actually are what we projected and not the maximum, then that would generate $1.5 million in surplus, but doing so would require everybody to increase their costs, both the district and the employees. And I think perhaps there's there's a different plan for that. But our recommendation always is going to find a way to get to that maximum funding level somehow through committed reserves, through however we get there. We believe that we should fund what our maximum liability is, and if that doesn't happen, great. We retain those surpluses. We've not spent it, but we're prepared to spend it should that necessity come about. So let's talk slightly about reserves, and that's what these paragraphs talk about. So reserves are held by a self-funded health plan employer for essentially two purposes. One is to have cash on hand to smooth out those spikes in claims so that there's not a cash flow crunch should a large claim or multiple large claims occur in 1 month. The bigger point of having reserves, however, is incurred but not reported claims. So in the event that the district should elect some year to dissolve their self-funded plan, buy insurance from Blue Cross or Aetna or United or whomever, there would be claims that were incurred during the plan and during your plan year, but would not be paid until after the plan was over. Those claims are the responsibility of the district, and we estimate just typically that that's about 2.5 months worth of plan expenses on the outside. So if that equates to about 21% of your annual cost. So we're suggesting that the district should hold reserves somewhere around $2.1 million. That's going to go up, it's going to go down, but somewhere in that area. We're also estimating that for this plan year, you'll generate about $1.2 million of that, suggesting we needed about an additional $800,000 to fully fund your reserve account. So how the district chooses to fund their health plan is entirely yours. We believe that funding to the maximum liability is the conservative path to take. It eliminates most of the financial risk to the district and will establish the proper reserve over time, because not every year, and in fact most years, you're not going to get to it. So over time, as you build these reserves, we factor all that into the funding equation for the following years and maybe use some of those reserves if we've got too much, or it's an ever-moving target. So that's always going to be our recommendation, that between the administration and ourselves, we come up with a way that we can get to our funding that's necessary through whatever means is possible. So, Dr. Rios.
Okay.
If I can just address what he presented, can we go to the needed reserves? Okay, that right there. Okay. So they're recommending that we have 2.1 million in reserves, but they're also indicating that at the end of the year, if everything stays consistent, we will have 1.2 of that 2.1 million, which is a much more favorable situation that we have been in the past few years. What I'd like for the board to consider as we move forward is that at the end of August, when Ms. Valdez presents to us the favorability at the end of the year, every year we've gotten closer to an actual budget. So this year we believe that it's going to be right around $500,000, which is really good budgeting. I would recommend to the board that we allocate that 0.5 million to build the reserves in the healthcare. I don't think that we should go into the budget to build the reserves, but since it's favorability, it's money that we didn't spend this year, and we do that over the next couple of years, we can get to the required reserves or recommended reserves. I think that would address that and give us a plan to get to that point.
Okay, so does it matter where the reserve is at?
It only matters in the sense that we should combine the reserves combined with the expected revenue for that year, it should come out to the $12.2, $12.3 million.
Yeah, I guess my question is it we try to reserve some money inside fund balance anyway?
Right, except these are two distinct funds.
They are, but does it matter? Is it a technical difference? Is it a legal difference? Is what?
I'm gonna reserve that question for the consultants.
I don't think it's illegal. There's no legal issue with where you get those dollars. Our suggestion is simply that those dollars be available.
Yeah. That's my only statement is,
Right.
if we've already got the reserve, it's already there, just not in that bucket, so.
Right, and I see your point, but I also think it's important, especially as we talk about using fund balance for whether it be construction needs or what we can say they're dedicated in fund balance, but I just believe that the health fund itself should be a picture unto itself.
Yeah, I'm just wanting to weigh the options. I'm not saying one way or the other right at the moment, but if we've got 3 months worth of fund balance there to carry the district through woes, right? This would the purpose of it would be a woe, but I'm not weighing one way. I'm just throwing it out as an option.
Right. And then the next point on the funding for the plan year, one a little bit higher, sir.
Dr. Rios, real quick,
Mr.
but
Conte?
also isn't the, if we go through the TRE, isn't that gonna give us additional dollars to be able to allocate some of that and just move and swap them around to where you can bring that? I mean, wouldn't that be a factor in itself?
Sure, yes, sir. And that's the next point I want to talk to, because now I want to talk about the planned revenue, the projected revenue. If we look at their recommendation, it would create an additional surplus of $710,000, correct?
Right.
However, we have to keep in mind that $11.4 million, okay, that's inclusive of $1.8 million that the board allocated last year from fund balance. So if we were to agree with that amount, we have to commit either from our operating budget or our fund balance another $1.8 million. My recommendation to the board is that we not do that, that we consider the 710 that is there, or that would be there, okay? That brings us down to $1.1 million that we'd have to commit, and that we arrive at that $1.1 million from a contribution from our money, which is the new money we would get from a TRE if we did that.
And what about the solar panel? Because this is the year to take advantage, because we're getting a one-time shot with that. Wouldn't that make a difference also?
Well, I think that we'd have to look at that because we haven't had a formal discussion, but it possibly could. So anyhow, my recommendation would be that we consider that 1.8 million that is still outstanding, that we say, okay, let's subtract the 710,000 from that. That leaves us contributing $1.1 million. The reason I'd be comfortable recommending that we contribute less than what's projected there is, one, because there's a surplus, two, because we would have a fund balance, the 1.2 that's projected plus the 500,000 that I would recommend that we put in that fund, and then we only have to come up with $1 million as opposed to 1.8 million from last year, or 1.1 million. Some of that would probably come from shared costs, and I'm not talking about employee contribution. We would continue to recommend full coverage for employees, employee only. But in the employee and family, and employee and children, employee and spouse, that we would have to consider over the next few months with the insurance committee. And it could be as little as $100,000 entirely, or it could be as little as nothing. However, that would be our recommendation moving forward.
Well, it would have to be either that or increase all rates by 8%, correct?
That would be one way to get there.
Yeah.
There are
Which-
many ways to get to the ultimate number, and Dr. Rios has been very creative about coming up with all kinds of different ways to do it. And we took a real simplistic approach and just increased everybody's cost by 8%, and there you go. But there are
Which-
many, many ways to get there.
Which is too great of an increase for a lot of our employees. Any other questions?
No, I think this is a conversation that we're gonna have to come back, because there's still a lot of, in my opinion, a lot of uncertainties that might come up here in the next few months that would ease the pain on coming up with this unfunded amount that we're trying to figure out where it's gonna come from. How much time do we have to make a decision, Dr. Hughes?
Well, we really have time, because the board, our recommendation is going to be that we contribute the $1 million or $1 million from this next year's.
This is
budget.
2019, right?
Right. But because it's for 19, as we get, as they finalize the RFP, on the budget, we'll say $1 million from our part. As they finalize the RFP, maybe there's some savings in there that will generate through the RFP process. But we could come back in September, in October and November, or even in December, and the board could allocate, based on their recommendation through us, an additional $500,000 from fund balance if we needed to. And as we mentioned last year, we have enough fund balance where we could make additional allocation. So we have until really November, December to do the final number. But for now, the administration is comfortable increasing the employee contribution in aggregate $1 million. And based on the numbers that we'll share with you at the end of this presentation and then in the final workshop, we'll see how everything comes together. But that would be our recommendation for now. And then if need be, we could revisit this in October, November, but I doubt that we'll have to. I would be very surprised if we did. It's definitely no guarantees.
Any other questions? I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Judge.
Next item that we have on our agenda is item 3B, Operations and Technology. Mr. Leslie Hang.
Good evening, President Mesa and Dr. Rios, members of the board. For tonight's facility and operations workshop, we'll be looking at the sustainability plan to include the following components: painting project, heating and air conditioning, classroom furniture, technology equipment, district paving replacement, transportation, fleet vehicles. Then we'll look briefly at some of the items that we had on our list from the Citizens Committee's project list during the 2016 bond election, a status report on some of those items, and then discuss briefly how the ESCO project is going to help address some of these issues that we've been unable to do at this point. So starting out, what I did is I went through the sustainability plan from last year, and we tried to put some type of measurable numbers to these, because I know that we did fall short on some of our projections. And what we did is we looked at some of our active projects that we've had this year and ran the numbers on the cost per square foot based on the square footage of the campus to try and get a tangible number there. In order to do this, I believe last year's plan was 15 or 18 years out. We consolidated it down to 10 years this time around. And this would be a plan that we would look at every year around this time as we're going into budget conversations. For the interior painting project, what I'm proposing for this upcoming school year would be Cardwell Elementary and Calderon Elementary. And those are based on the contractual numbers that we've been running with for all the painting projects that we've been doing so far. Now, some of these, as you're going through the spreadsheet, some of these were extremely high in cost, so what we did is we ended up breaking them up over a couple of years. The high school is going to stick out on a lot of these just because of the overall square footage of the campus. And ultimately, I didn't want to have real high numbers one year and then real low, so we tried getting them within alignment the best that we could. And then I've got everything else mapped out to where it goes straight through until 2028, which is a 10-year plan. Again, we can revisit that. As the needs of the district change, then we can work through this plan and make any other changes that we need to. The next portion of this is the exterior painting. For this upcoming school year, we're proposing Dr. Lonnie Green on the exterior paint as well as Cardwell. And those costs, again, they're based on the square footage of what we're paying for exterior paint. They're going to fluctuate depending on how much brick is on the building and different things like that. So again, we're trying to at least target 2 campuses every year. I think that's a good start, and again, we can change these numbers. Well, we can't change the numbers because they are what they are, but we can change the order and look at where those priorities and things are as well. The heating and air conditioning portion, this one we are going to be leveraging a lot. The ESCO project that we have currently, we're in the works on. Our 3 biggest campuses that we're reportedly having troubles with at the moment are Del Rio High School, Lonnie Green, and Calderon. So we were able to get those portions there put into the air conditioning total replacement. And working with Snyder, we were able to get a projected total replacement cost, which is what you see on the left-hand side there. That's if we had to replace everything at the campus. So that's our worst case number. And then based on that, we were able to break it down. So in the case of Cardwell, we know that we do have a lot of opportunities there for heating and air conditioning. As we're working through what that transition at that location looks like long-term, for now, we're proposing to have a steady amount of monies that would be set aside and available just for repairs on those campus or on that particular campus. And again, if some of these units were replaced through the hail damage project, and in doing so, there's no reason to replace those again. So we have to be a little bit flexible as we go through and identify, what's a 20-year-old air conditioning unit versus a 2-year-old unit. So trying to be flexible, but also trying to project out so as we're working with all these other budget items, there's no surprises, at least from the operations side. We also have down here wagon wheel, which we have future plans for that, so I've just marked that off as long-range plan, as well as the file retention building. We will have more information on long-term what that looks like. And our new construction projects that we did, Early College, Blended Academy, and CTE, right now they all have new units, so we've even taken them out of the equation at this point. And then we move on to classroom furniture. I thought for this slide it would be helpful to give a little bit of historical information to see kind of what we budget for when it comes to district-wide furniture. This can be instructional and non-instructional. Typically, we lean towards the instructional side for obvious reasons. But for this upcoming year, we're recommending to bring in 120 new desks and chairs for Del Rio freshmen, as well as 40 new tables and chairs, or desks and chairs for Blended Academy. And then we just have a rollout period here where we're targeting campuses throughout. So again, last year we had over $30,000 budget, but that just kind of keeps us going, and at this point that budget's depleted, so we're using every bit of that we get in our normal budget. The technology equipment refresh, all the computers that we replaced 4 years ago, they are starting to fall out of warranty, so I want to make sure that we have a plan in place to be able to address those. Some of the items that we've listed on here is the device count for the desktop computers, and these costs would be an annual cost as you work across the spreadsheet there. But again, we broke it down into, actually it's coming up on 5 years now. With this plan, we're also looking to expand the number of classrooms within the classrooms, going from 2 computers to 4 computers, because there have been a lot of requests to have more technologies available throughout some of the campuses, some of the different avenues that we communicate with staff. They've reported this in via teacher forum and different avenues like that. In order to increase the number of desktops, that next line item is support for switches and cable, because we would have to do some infrastructure work to be able to support the additional computers. Laptop computers, that's about an $86,000 a year investment to replace those every 4 to 5 years, based on 494 laptops. The WISE terminals, we're a little over 1,000 on those, and those are used in labs throughout the district, and we really leverage those a lot during testing time as well. One-to-one devices, primarily they're being used at freshmen in high school, so there's allocation in here to be able to replace those. Those are at least 5 years old right now, so we do need to start moving forward with replacing those. iPads, which are currently at kinder, 1st and 2nd grade, we're trying to expand those all the way up to 5th grade, at which point we move the students over to laptops, and then they would use laptops all the way through their senior year. So we're trying to get some consistency on what these devices look like, and just trying to get the students used to using these devices, and the easiest way to do that is to bring them up with the technology. In the past, those iPads have been funded through IMA funds. I think that's the plan still moving forward. So that's why they're showed as zeroed out at this point. The office and classroom phones, right now we have a count of 1,225 of those, and through our project we had over the summer, a lot of those have been replaced, so that number more than likely will be changing in the upcoming days here. Network printers, right now we're sporting about 508 of those. Those are the printers in the offices, classrooms, non-copiers. To be able to replace those on a regular basis so they're not breaking down while staff are trying to use them, that's going to be an investment of a little over $31,000 a year. Currently we do have 81 Toshiba copiers spread throughout the district. The majority of those are black and white. I think we may have 3 color copiers. But we have been working on a plan over the last few months now to consolidate printing and remove the classroom printers, just to be more efficient. The additional cost that's created by 500 devices versus 80 machines is quite significant when you're talking paper, toner, storing all that equipment and everything. So what we're looking at this upcoming year is a new implementation of consolidated printing over at Dr. Lonnie Green Elementary, and once that's up and running, then we'll make Lamar Elementary the next location for that. And it's going to be like a live demo that we're going to do and see how the support goes and just make sure it's going to be the right fit for the district before we do it across the board. But we know we can't sustain what we currently have today, so we have to try some things a little bit different. I'm proposing right now 10 copiers. That would be 5 for Lonnie Green and 5 for Lamar to start with. Biggest challenges are going to be the hallways and identifying areas. But I have been working with campus staff to look at some different ideas on what we can do differently, and I'm seeking a lot of input from campus administration on that. District paving replacement.
Sorry, sir.
Sorry.
Go back. We, that was not correct. On the copiers, the Toshiba copiers, you said 10 extra, you said 5 for Lonnie Green and 5 for Lamar. Did I hear you correctly?
That would be minimal, yes.
Okay, so we said 10 copiers. The biggest need was at the high school, though. So the campuses that would benefit from those, I don't want anybody to quote us on, and then later that's not the case.
Thank
We're talking
you.
about 10 additional copiers, but not for the elementary right now. These copiers are primarily for the secondary campuses. Not to say that some of them would not end up at elementary, but we'll come up with the fixed plan on those. A lot of what is being included in this plan has to do, and we're very grateful for it, the input from the Teacher Communication Council. So when we talk about the increase in furniture, the increase in classroom desktops for the students to have 4 per classroom, the increase in copiers, all of these are things that we've been working with the Teacher Communication Council as needs that have been identified. So I know for a fact that those copiers, that issue primarily started at the high school. So anyway, but we'll come back with a definite plan for those.
Thank you. One other point I would like to make here on the Toshiba copiers is the 81 that I have listed here, that's already budgeted for on a 5-year lease. So that's not new monies that we're asking for, that contains its own budget already. And it's been that way for quite some time. Moving on to district paving replacement.
I got a couple of questions.
Sure.
So
Mr.
I'm
Smith?
just trying to do some quick math here. So, it's confusing. So, you're talking about 10 new units in 1 year?
At a minimal, yes. And they're around
And-
$3,000 a unit roughly is what we've been getting them for.
Okay, so explain to me the 265,000 for 81.
A lot of those are higher volume copiers there. I'm not proposing the exact type of make and model that we currently have today, so there is a premium price that goes with that.
Got it, okay. So these are like mega units and the others are like.
The big ones, we have some areas that print 5 million copies in a year. So, I mean, it
That's
just
fine.
depends
So I
on the
just
areas.
the math didn't make sense.
Okay.
Now, are we buying these copiers straight out, or is it a lease program with a company, or?
It's a 5-year lease through Toshiba with a buyout option at the end of that if we want. And we do have constant real-time reporting on them, so any of them that are low in printout numbers, we will be owning those at the end of this lease, and I'm hoping to leverage that savings to help expand the printer project.
I have some questions, but I'll reserve that to the end
Okay.
in regard to air conditioning.
Okay. The district paving project, what we're proposing for this upcoming year is to really focus on Lonnie Green with traffic over there. There's been a lot of conversation about bringing in a back driveway on the back side of the campus to be able to clear some of that traffic off the street. And we've been doing our research, and there's not any paving areas out there that we feel are in dire need at this point, other than needing to have a solution over at Lonnie Green. And they already have the land, so it's just a matter of, working that land and being able to put in something that's going to be easier for pickup and drop off. We're guesstimating that one at $400,000. There has not been a formal quote on that yet, so that number will stand to change, but we feel pretty confident in the other projects we've done that we're close. And then we do have a schedule in place for all the other campuses moving out to, again, 2028. And a lot of these are, we're going to have to look at and determine, it's really difficult to say what pavement's going to look like 5 years from now. So these will be a case-by-case basis.
Hey, Mr. Hing, are we doing any preventive maintenance on those pavings? Are we doing any overlays? Are we going back and doing anything to the ones that are actually in good shape?
No, sir. And that was the discussion that we had in preparing this. We decided to focus on Lonnie Green because we know that the need is there. But along with that, the discussion, or what Mr. Henge offered, was to direct Mr. Mark also to conduct a formal study on all of the paving needs to include what we could possibly do to extend the life of them so that we wouldn't have to come back and do a whole repair at some point. So we're going to use this year to just focus on Lonnie Green, but simultaneously be able to do a good assessment, maybe even hire a consultant to let us know what we can do to have a good plan, because we do have a lot of square footage that's paved. We just need a better plan on maintaining it and having the plan for replacement what it should be.
Okay.
So that every year we've improved this plan. This compared to last year is a huge improvement. And even earlier today, we talked about the next components that have to be added. For example, we have a whole lot of water fountains in the district that need to be replaced. We have a whole lot of playground equipment that also needs to be replaced. We have, what's the other part
I have a whole slide on that.
Oh, good, okay, I'm sorry, I apologize.
That's okay, that's okay. All
Where you
right.
going?
Transportation, fleet service vehicles. I did pull some historical information on this, just so I was well versed in it as well, and where that fleet sits today. And the yellow fleet, at this point, they're scheduled for retirement numbers. They're at 20 buses. And I did go out, I took a look at the buses. They try and retire them after about 200,000 miles. Really, our bad buses look good. They just do. Now, mechanically, that may be another story, air conditioning, things like that, and you're going to have those routine issues. But I feel that right now this last year we did 3 new buses this last year. And so we have been giving those over the last few years. From 2013 to 2018, we replaced 14 buses. So I feel we're on the right track with that, but we have to be mindful that we can't let that one get away from us either. The maintenance fleet from 2013 to 2018, we purchased 7 vehicles. I've purchased 2 of those this year, so prior to that, it's been 5 vehicles. So at this point, we're looking at possibly 2, and then I think our maintenance fleet will probably be in pretty good shape, at least for this upcoming year. And again, we're going to revisit this as we go. Patrol vehicles for campus security. From 2013 to 2018, there were 3 new ones that were purchased, 4 that were retired, 3 that are scheduled for retirement. The plan that I have down here has us entering into the possibility of a lease for those vehicles because of their high cost. The lease, I believe, would be 4 years. 4 years. With that, we would have a buyout option at the end of the lease. And these costs that I've shared here also outline the sirens, the lights, all the cosmetic stuff that goes into these if we entered into the lease agreement.
Have we looked at, when we buy, where do we buy from? Do we buy from the co-op already? Do you know? And then have we gone to the local?
We
'Cause
have had
we don't
some.
seem to buy very many vehicles in the last 5 years. I'm just.
We have reached out recently to some local dealerships, so I know that has been discussed.
Good evening, President Mesa, board members. Yes, sir, Mr. Contreras. In previous years, the last vehicle that was purchased, it arrived fully equipped with radio equipment, lights, And all we did here was put decals on them.
Oh, okay, okay. But when we buy the vehicles, do we buy them through the co-op? Buy co-op, or do you know?
So they go through the buy board process. The last one, again, that was purchased came out of McKinney. I went to the local dealers here after that, and we now have at least one from the Dodge dealership here that is registered on the buy board, so that hopefully we can do business locally, but we'll still put those bids out as required.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions on vehicles?
Yeah, I got
Mr.
a
Smith?
couple. So you said these are high cost, and math tells me it's about 20 grand a piece. So
32, right?
Yes, sir. Again, off a recollection from the last vehicle that was purchased, the vehicle itself was in the range of about $28,000. Once we put the additional equipment on it, cost to the district was around $32,000.
okay, so how does that work? If you're gonna, are you downsizing, or if you got 60 grand tied to buying vehicles that cover less than 1 point something?
Yes, sir.
So you're
Right,
retiring three, and how you gonna do three for 60
The-
grand? is the
The lease option works out to around 5,000 a year is what we use to formulate that. And
Got it,
then,
okay.
And then we would still have to outfit it, but we would do that with the idea that we would pay it off at the end of the lease. And that's why on that line item in 2022, you see it jump back up again,
Yeah,
because that's entering into the new lease to hopefully do 2 or 3 more.
got it, makes
And then
sense.
it out.
So you're downsizing one unit?
No, sir.
No? Okay, so you're scheduled
You're just gonna
to
for
retire
retirement
4
is
and
3.
new purchase 3, so that math tells me you're downsizing, but I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah, it shouldn't be downsizing. No, sir.
I'm sorry, correction. Those 4 vehicles were retired, but they weren't necessarily retired this year. I think they're giving, if we look at it over the last 5 years, then yes, it would,
Okay, so this isn't an annual number?
yes, sir. This year, we're scheduling 3 vehicles to be retired this year, and that's mainly because they've retired themselves already. It's kind of hard to, they don't work anymore.
Okay, just, maybe the data is just confusing, no big deal. Okay, so you're now downsizing, in other words. You got, the buses, you said you run those 200,000, these units and the maintenance vehicles, what do they run before you call them like?
The last maintenance vehicle we retired had over 800,000 miles. So it's a different beast depending on which department and the mileage and everything.
Wait, go ahead.
Dr. Rios?
And just for further clarity, the maintenance vehicles, they go 600, 700, 800,000 miles. We buy them with 100,000 miles already. We don't buy brand new vehicles, not for the maintenance department.
Mr. Contreras, you had a question?
Yes, those retired vehicles, how do we get rid of them? Do we go through the usgovernment.gov selling them, through auction, or how do we dispose of those vehicles? I mean, I know from prior history from the city, it seemed to work out and get a lot more just to try to sell them outright when you put them out for bid.
I'm looking at Paula
And you sell-
Johnson to save me, so. Paula will tell us how we retire those vehicles.
I thought that was a purpose of lease, you just give it back to them and they go figure that deal out. No?
Yeah, but these aren't leases, they're
When we retire the vehicles, we put them on a surplus sale, and we normally put a minimum amount,
okay.
and then we advertise it, and it's open to the public.
So you're the one with the bank book.
Sir?
You're the one with the paycheck, with the
Right.
checkbook.
Oh,
Okay,
sure.
now we know who to go to.
Sure.
Any other questions? So, Dr. Rios, you want to make a
Well,
statement?
just to clarify Mr. Smith's question, even though they would be on a lease, it's a lease and option to buy. We're not looking to returning those vehicles. We're looking to keep them for the extent of the lease and to end up buying them. So we would still use them beyond the term of the lease.
Good, yeah, thank you.
You can go on.
Okay, so the sustainability project summary based on all those numbers, and I know we've gone through a lot of information here. The proposed amount to make all this happen for the 2018-19 school year, we're looking at $2,613,796.25. And again, these projects, we can have conversations, but that's what we feel that we need in order to provide all the needs right now.
Can we go talk to that one?
You
just a
want
minute?
to, okay.
So, what would have been, I mean, last year, or this year, you're projecting 900 grand, and then we're gonna go to 2.6. What was your track record on that previous years? I know it's not gonna be, I know we had some deficit on what we were doing for PMs and corrective maintenance and all that kind of thing, but.
Right, the two biggest components on this, in my opinion, are technology, because we didn't have that last year. That's the refresh. We made a significant investment about 4 years ago to replace all the technology. It all was under a 3-year warranty. That warranty started running towards the end of last year, and we knew this year that was going to have to get feathered in at some capacity. So what I'm presenting you here tonight with is best case scenario from where I sit. Now, obviously, there's gonna be some give and take.
Yeah, and level it out, so you don't have those spikes like you had
Right,
3 years
right.
ago.
Technology added $1 million, and then the heating and air conditioning, because district-wide, that total replacement cost is projected around $18 million. The ESCO project's gonna help, but we still have repairs that need to be made.
Do we know how many dollars that were covered in the insurance? Is that, when you were replacing those on insurance for the hail damage, is that in that 800K or no?
We're still calculating all those replacement units, but as far as the ESCO project, we're already looking at a credit of $150,000 back because of those units that were replaced through the insurance.
So that's on top of this 871?
So, oh yeah, that was a separate project. That wasn't included in the 871. The 871 was primarily the painting project that we had, interior and exterior of both campuses, the new buses that we purchased, and I believe the activity buses might be in there as well.
You have any ballpark of what that was that we spent in the insurance money on HVAC? Any rough guesstimate?
No, I can get that for you, but it was extremely high. It was a separate
Yeah, I'm just
container.
trying to see if, you know what I mean, because going from 870 to 2.6, and it's obvious that you got some math that's missing in the 870. It helped level that out. I don't know what that means, if that's 500K or $1 million. I don't know what it is, but it may help level that number out where it doesn't look so threatening.
The asphalt wasn't included in last year's, or if it was at a very small capacity, so that's $400,000. And then the technology refresh, that was $1 million.
Now, but what about the HVAC? Isn't that covered by the Snyder Electric? And it's included in there?
Mr. Contreras, they didn't finish answering Mr. Smith's question. I think Dr. Rios has a comment.
Okay, so first to answer Mr. Smith's question, if we compare the 871 last year, there's a whole lot of blanks there, not because we didn't budget for it last year, but if you remember, I shared with y'all that plan was completed in a rush way as the previous operations director was moving out, and we were trying to present to the board. When we came back, a whole lot of the money that was budgeted for these other projects had to be moved just to do the painting projects. So then Les took pretty much the better part of the year to closer examine every cost, whether it be conferencing with ESCO or looking at the painting projects, square footage, recalculating everything. And that's why we have these larger amounts. So to give us a better indication, if we can go back, Les, and put the actual dollar amount that you budgeted last year based on the first worksheet that was done, so we can see the growth between what was budgeted and really what the actual costs are this year. That's the first part that's going to show the biggest increase. And the second part is that the biggest, the most significant increase is the technology piece, about $1.2 million. But the other part has to do with just how off the calculations were for the rest of the projects.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with the concept. I'm just trying to square the math up, so thank you.
Mr. Contreras?
Yeah, I see where it says 600,000 for the HVAC. Isn't that covered though by the $18 million for the Schneider?
Yeah.
What?
No, sir. If we go back, let's take me back to the HVAC worksheet. If you look. One more. There you go. If you look at what the Schneider project is doing, it's a whole lot of lighting, but in terms of ACs, they're doing $7 million alone at the high school, 7.1 million. That's that first column that's highlighted in red. And they're doing Lonnie Green and Fermin Calderon. That's the only AC projects that are covered under the ESCO project. Now, let's work with them, and he came out with solid figures for the rest of the schools and what it would take. But we're only addressing the high school and the two of the campuses with the highest need. That's why we have to budget ourselves on what we would do moving forward to make sure that we maintain or replace them as needed.
Okay. Now, now let's go back to the painting. It seems in the exterior paint, you had $1 budget. Is that us doing the work or a private contractor? It seems pretty low for square footage, $1 on the exterior. And the interior, I believe you had $1.25. Now, is that actual quotes that you got for, or you're just guesstimating there?
No, those are actual quotes that we've received with the current painting projects we have going on. So the bids that came in on that's for contracted labor, right? And then the materials, we supply the paints.
Okay, so it's just basically labor.
Right, so it's
Okay.
yes.
Okay, it just
And
had
those
the
are
appearance.
actual numbers based on
But
what
as
we've
far
done.
as with the material, how much are we looking at? Have you averaged the cost?
I think the cost was actually average there between the materials and the labor on it. And again, some of it's going to be flexible because if they have more for the exterior, if they have more brick, it's going to be less paint, it's going to be less time. So I'm trying to figure out some way to quantify it that it's going to make sense for all the campuses, but this is as close as we have so far.
So they're not actual bids for campus?
No, because bids are only good for 30 days. So to get someone out here to bid out the entire district, knowing that those numbers are going to change 6 months or a year from now. So we have to try and figure out the best that we can with the tools that we have. And again, we revisit this every year. So going off this plan, if this doesn't change, now I know what 2 campuses we're looking at for next year. We can initiate the bids right away, and then that will give us our actual numbers. And then we can look to either favorability or not.
And this should be closer than the prior?
A whole lot closer.
All right.
If we, for example, if I may, Mr. President?
Yes.
If we consider what we paid this year, let's consider North Heights at $100,000. And then next year, Calderon, we're projected at $91,900. So it's roughly $9,000 less at Calderon. And if we consider the size of Calderon to the size of North Heights, it's about 10% smaller. So it's very accurate. Whereas compared to the numbers that were presented in last year's budget, they were really way off.
Okay. Would you be able to send me this presentation so I can save it to my files?
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. And this, I would assume, would be posted on the website as well, but I'll get you a copy of it.
Great.
For sure.
Okay. Any other questions? You can go.
So, future sustainability initiatives, this goes back to Dr. Rios earlier, discussing some other things that we need to have in this plan that are not currently in here. As we collaborated as a group, we came up with some more ideas, and I'll be getting these tabs added in as well, but we want to take a look at district security improvements. Currently, we do have a installation of security camera project going on. But I would assume that we will only expand that in the near future as well. We're currently in the process of working on some reconfigurations to the classroom door handles throughout the district, expansion of the keyless entry system that we have in place, and then the repairs and expansion of campus fences throughout the district. Another tab would be for the athletics facilities. Improvements to the football fields. We would also put a plan in place for the water fountains, both interior and exterior water fountains. And then landscaping, where we would look at floor and wall renovations district-wide, gym floor repair and replacement, playground improvements. Irrigation is also something else that we'll be working with Snyder on through the ESCO project. We've seen a lot of opportunities to be able to save on the irrigation side of things. So next, we can move into the 2016 Bond Election Citizens Committee recommendations. I've broken these down by sections, so we have elementary, and then we move into secondary, and so on. I wanted to outline all the items that were submitted through that request, and all these items went together and produced what we felt was a good list for the bond election. Obviously, that did not go through. The needs are still there, and so we've continued on at certain areas where we can. So what I've done is gone through and kind of outlined what's either in progress, been completed, or we've been able to get an architect engaged to at least do some discovery work and find out long-term what some of these solutions would look like. At the secondary level, again, I did the same thing. We've highlighted the classrooms and halls that are being worked on currently. It's 200 and 400 wing. That's in the architect stage right now. The restrooms, they started demoing those last week. So we're constantly in communications with the general contractor on that. And then, of course, the bleachers on the visitor side at the stadium were replaced. As you can see, there are still a lot of needs here. Flooring is a big one, restroom requests, things like that. So we're still developing that plan of what that's going to look like. And then we have district initiatives, being able to bring back Cody Wardlaw Gym. We're in the process of restoring power over there. We have Old Garfield that it was requested or suggested rather to do a staff development facility or remodel it into federal programs. We've done discovery with the architects to see what that would look like as a new campus. And then that goes into the new elementary on the north side and new elementary at the Cardwell site. Both of those, we've done some discoveries at this point. The drawing in the lower left-hand corner is the proposed new Cardwell site. And we're getting final documents on those, so I'll be able to provide more of an update during my monthly board update, where we're at with completing out those projects until we move on to a funding source of some sort with that. And then, of course, the energy savings project, or the ESCO project. The ESCO project, primarily what we're looking at is lighting upgrades. A lot of this work is gonna start taking off around October, November timeframe. We're having weekly meetings with Snyder right now, and we're addressing basically putting together all the lists that we need of everything by location. They're working out the logistics to mobilize people and to get all the trades out here that they need to start actually conducting the work. As far as the lighting upgrades, we're really going to be targeting Del Rio High School immediately. Buena Vista, Ruben Chavita, they're going to be at the top of that list as well. So we'll have some contractors working at the high school, and when they get done, then they're moving to an elementary school, and they're going to bounce back and forth. By doing that, we make sure they don't get too far ahead. I don't want it to be too disruptive for staff or students. And we're going to be able to take care of some of these things that have been out there for a long time. Air conditioning or air conditioner maintenance and repair. Some of that work is going to start beginning as well in November. We are still putting together some of these lists yet, so I don't have the timelines or the exact order in which we're going to go through the campuses. But again, I'll be reporting that monthly as that project matures. And then the air conditioner replacement, that's solely going to be at the high school, Lonnie Green, and Calderon. So they'll be doing maintenance and repairs and things like that on other air conditioning units. And at the end of the project, if we are favorable, we would have the opportunity to reinvest that money into additional air conditioning if we feel the need to. So we have some flexibility and some time to work through that, but right now the high school really needs to have the attention.
Okay, can I ask a couple of questions tied to that deal?
Yes, sir.
First of all, I wanted to thank you and your staff for preparing this very detailed operations 10-year plan. And again, we save questions usually for the end because I know that it is a long report, but it's very detailed, and I know it's time-consuming on your behalf. So I thank you for preparing this report, and gives us lots of information.
Thank you.
So I'm going to open it for questions. Mr. Smith has one first.
Yeah, getting back to the energy savings project and the painting project, are those, what we talked about was trying to tie those like with the lighting together as one project, and reserve money is tied to that. But I don't see the connection here, so I'm just trying to get my brain around that.
Yes, sir. Obviously, the first remodeling project and paint project would be at the high school, the 200 and 400 wing. Mm-hmm. And the architects for the 200 and 400 wing have already met with Schneider Electric and Mr. Henge and his staff to plan that out and how we're going to roll that out. Now, when we present more of the budget next week, I'm also presenting a plan for additional money, but from the budget to either allocate to doing some things at the same time that the Schneider Electric's doing, or set money aside for future construction of another elementary school. The board kind of has to have a discussion because I'm again talking about $2 million. So how the board wants to use that money and what direction they provide. But right now, the construction efforts are only being leveraged between high school and Schneider. Here in the next, I guess 2 weeks is when we have the next budget workshop, Ms. Valdez? Yes, at that point, we're going to present that $2 million allocation and have a discussion on how we would use that money.
I have a couple of questions, and then I'll turn it over to the other board members. In regard to air conditioning, HVAC, some of the older campuses, are you looking at insulation in some of those older campuses at all when you're looking at HVAC?
At this point, especially with engaging the ESCO project, we're looking at everything energy savings wise right now to help complement what it is they're going to be doing to the district. So yes.
Especially the older campuses, Dr. Vitt?
There was a line item on the ESCO project even went into much detail as far as sealing the whole, what they call the envelope. And that was at the high school, which is the oldest campus. We've also talked about the need at Cardwell, but just because we don't know what we're going to do at campus, we just allocated $50,000. It could go to insulation, it could go to repairs. But the other projects, Snyder knows to advise us on anything that's out of the scope of the project. And then all of that we bring back to the board because it would be a change order. But because we have favorability that they've already identified, we would have room to make some of those decisions in consultation with the board along the way. So we're looking forward to ESCO advising us as much as possible.
Good. I'm glad. And I was going to mention Cardwell because it is very different from the other campuses in regard to, you have individual classrooms in regard to wings at other newer campuses. My other question had to do with furniture. I was able to participate in a project that TASB had in judging architectural design and renovations, and in looking at all the new construction that happened throughout last year. Traditionally, they're getting away from the traditional seating, and I know we're purchasing a lot of desks again, but most of the campuses that are, again, newer construction, they're phasing out the traditional student desk.
And we have had that conversation, especially with CTE and early college being so different on the furniture. There is a premium price involved with that. These items that I've spec'd out here, right around the $100 a mark piece. So obviously, some of those tables can be as much as $700-800 piece.
We did, particularly when we met with the freshman campus, which the need's the greatest there because just the size of the kids today is much larger than the size from probably 15 years ago when the furniture was bought. And they, we have a budget obviously that we want to work with, but they were told that we would work with them in terms of what design of furniture they want. I know that the ELA classes mentioned they wanted tables instead of desks. So that's already being considered. And nothing's going to be ordered from Mr. Henge's desk. It's going to be ordered from the principal's desk consulting with the teachers. We will have the budget amount to work with, but within that budget amount, we'll definitely help the campus or give the campus as much leeway and say so as possible.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea to allow them to make the choice. Everybody's different in regard to seating assignments and so forth, seating arrangement. Questions from other board members? Mrs. Webb?
I just have a question regarding the air condition. Since we're replacing the units for Lonnie Green and Fermin Calderon, have we replaced any units at the other elementary campuses? And I'm not talking about Cardwell, I'm talking about elementary campuses. The reason I ask is the last two elementary campuses to be built were Calderon and Lonnie Green.
I can tell you that there were some units that were replaced through the insurance recovery. Okay. The majority of the calls that we get are about compressors going out, so it's not a significant investment on that. Roughly, it's about $4,000 a classroom. But the different configurations and how the buildings are laid out definitely has an impact on that air conditioning flow and how hard the units and everything work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Contreras?
Yes. One, it's not so much a question, it's a comment that as a board and Dr. Rios, that 2016 bond unfortunately didn't pass. However, the committee identified those items as critical needs for the school district. And while the school district has a lot of needs, but those 2 years ago were critical needs. And I would like for us to concentrate and start chipping away on some of those needs before we get into any bigger project without addressing those first, since they were addressed 2 years ago as critical needs. The people took the time to go to the schools, go walk through the schools and identify these things. So I would like for us to address those and start working and chipping away at those needs.
Dr. Rios?
Again, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to ask the board to allocate some money for some of the needs that were either identified through the bond or something else. And I think that, we've mentioned this in the past, but I really think it's critical that the board establish an operations committee where we can sit down with board members and review these things in detail so that because we definitely have an idea of what to do with the money. But I think that if there was a subcommittee, just like we have a finance committee and we have a policy committee, if we have an operations committee, then we can discuss in detail not only this plan that Mr. Henge presented, but future construction needs, as well as previously identified needs, and that these items be fully hatched out. So that, and I think that if it comes to that committee, it'll have the endorsement of that committee, and then it's easier to have an understanding, more transparency, and hopefully easier for the committee and the board to buy in, as well as give us a chance to just fully study it. So I would encourage the board to consider my recommendation again to form an operations committee. And we don't have to meet monthly like we do with the other committees. We can meet every 45 days. But I think that would really help us move forward with how we would spend either fund balance or that money that I'm recommending that we allocate.
Okay, I think that's a very good idea, and I'm so glad that you included that in your presentation, because we have it now.
And then the question I do have is, do we have any items for the special ed department? I mean, do we get anything from them as far as needs? I know that there's a school that's asking for a changing table, motorized changing table to change out kids. Do we address those issues? I mean, do we address the special ed department and their needs with these students, these children?
Dr.
Well, yes, we do. I don't know if there's ever been a need in special education of that sort that's never been met. Dr. Aguirre has always been really good about moving those forward, and when they come to our area, they're never denied. Now, obviously, we have to have that communication through Dr. Aguirre and through Ida Gomez, who oversees that as part of CNI. But absolutely, the bigger need, which we will again discuss with special education, has to do with staff and the training. And I mentioned that in the last board update I sent, so I hope that we'll have more discussions on that.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Ms. Sanders? Mr. Smith?
Go ahead, Ms. Haynes. You got it in front of me.
I'm just going to say thanks, Celeste. It was a really good presentation. There's a couple of things I'd like. I'll probably just come to you and ask you personally, but I do want to just thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Mr. Smith?
So, getting back to this facilities committee, I think that's a great idea. I know that there was a lot of work being put out by the citizen committee, and they came up with a list of recommendations. I'm not sure that list of recommendations, just to be clear from every board member, that was where the priorities were, right? So there was a list of items that need to be addressed, but I'm not sure that it prioritized things. So a committee to go and take that and work with it, I would endorse that. I'd volunteer to be on that group. So we put that together, put my name on the list. I'm good with that. And Les and team, trying to take this and normalize it every year is a challenge, right?
Exactly.
But as I stated back when that project was initiated, Yana County is going to thank you a bunch for that. But good job. Thank you for the effort.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez, any questions? Okay. I just, again, would like to reiterate there were many hours that were spent by our citizens in the committees for the bond election, and we don't necessarily have the reserves to do everything that was listed, but we certainly can take small chunks, as Mr. Contreras mentioned, and tackle them as we go throughout the years, and the ones that we are able to afford with whatever monies we have currently. But I think there was time well spent on identifying those needs, and we do have lots of needs, but I think we can start small and start chipping away at the larger list. And I want to thank you again. Dr. Rios, did you want to add anything?
Yes, sir. Before we go on to the next part of the agenda and conclude the workshop, I wanted to ask Ms. Valdez just to share with y'all the interactive worksheet that we'll use at the next budget meeting, because we'd like to email y'all this worksheet so you can play with it. And that just shows the bottom dollar, and you can plug in a yes for a certain type of raise and a yes for a certain type of cap, and that'll just help you balance the budget at the end so that you can have your idea, and when we come back, it'll facilitate it. It'll only take her about 7 minutes. Ms. Valdez, that's your time limit.
6.5.
Okay. Let me get the file open. Good evening, President Mesa, Dr. Rios, board members. I printed out a copy of the workbook. I know some of the pages will be difficult to read, but I just wanted you to have a version of it in front of you of what I'll be presenting on the screen. We put together an interactive workbook, again, in order to give you all the opportunity to look at the different choices or different recommendations that we have before us. Of course, the purpose of and the parameters that we're working with is to always maintain a balanced budget. The assumptions of this workbook are that all our student counts will remain the same, that the preliminary values that we received for from the appraisal value from the appraisal district, that includes the wind farm and their depreciation, and our historical appraisals have been positive, so we included those assumptions in our revenue calculations. We included the assumption that our tax levies will continue at our tax collection rates of 95.56%. We include the assumption that we will have a successful tax ratification election. And we will look at the different areas, which are some savings that we have generated, the general pay increase recommendations, the salary cap calculation, stipends, new positions, and the substitutes. And then all of the, you can see here that all of the tabs that are in green, any recommendation that you make on this tab will then appear on the last tab, which is the budget tab. In this workbook, we also have the calendar. Again, I just want you to know what's really the date. Our public hearing will be August 20th, which is the date where we would approve the budget and set the tax rate. That would be the tax rate that we set in order to have call a general election for our tax ratification election. Through the budget process, several campuses, of course, have instructional needs, and we have different ways that we're going to support those needs. The first one was addressed in this last board update, was the reclassification of GT teachers. So we have a summary in here that includes the reclassification of those teachers into classrooms to help us reduce the classroom size for an estimated savings of $379,000. We have the conversion of 2 physical education teacher positions to physical education aides, which is a plan that we have had in place, I believe, the last 2 budget years. This is a savings of $85,000. And in the last board update was the communication of the elimination of cabinet positions. 2 cabinet members are planning or have communicated retirement in December. And since this budget workbook is a 2-year workbook, we are showing a savings, a half-year savings in 18-19, then the other half of savings of their full year salaries in 19-20. These savings right here are included on the budget tab under the area that's titled Savings. Now, each of these tabs that are colored in green have the same format, but we'll start with general pay increase. Of course, TASB already presented the general pay increase of 1.8%, and different models were requested from TASB. A summary of those models is here, and this is the page that is, of course, the most difficult for you to read. But when you receive this on Excel, you'll be able to expand this to the size that you need. You do have all of the models here. You have 1.8%, which is the first model, and every model is in the same format, which you can see it starts with the teachers. It identifies their starting pay, what the 1.8% means for the teacher salary schedule, and it'll discuss how that salary schedule will have adjustments. Again, this is a summary of what TASB's presented, and this would reflect the 1.8% general pay increase. If this is the model that you select, for example, that would reflect $836,000 pay increase at 1.8% for teachers. Then there's $264,000 for administrative professionals, $200,000 for paraprofessionals, $197,000 for auxiliary. But you can see where this model at 1.8% has a total budget increase of $1.4 million. Same format for the other models. You have the 2% model, same format. The 2% model would be an increase of $1.5 million. The 2.2% model would be an increase of $1.7 million. You have the 2.4% model and the 2.8% model. The model that you choose to recommend is what you would select in this cell, and you could see how it drops down to each of the models. So the model that you select or that you recommend, you select, and that value will come up on the budget tab. The salary cap, I would
Can you
like...
just flip over to the budget tab real quick
Oh,
so you
sure.
can see exactly where it showed up?
So you can see here in this green area right here, this one you do not have printed out, but in this green area right here, since the tabs are green, this is the green area where your recommendations will come up. So for example, the 1.8% increase is a $1.4 million increase to our budget, so that's what's reflected here.
Okay, good. Every time you do that, go back just so they can see the change.
Oh, okay. And on the salary cap, I'll come back to that one since that one has a lot of information and may have a lot of questions. TASB also presented stipends for athletics, for fine arts, for academics. Again, same format. What we have here is all the stipends, what we are currently have on our salary schedules, what is being proposed. Same format for fine arts, what we currently have and what's being proposed. Same for academic, what we currently have and what's being proposed. You have your total current budget, what the total proposed budget would be, plus, and above it you have what the increase would be. So here, for stipends, you either select yes or no if you agree with or agree to recommend the increases that were proposed for these stipends. So if you select yes to all of the stipend groups, for example, you can see where the totals appear of the increase of the budget. Because again, we're looking at what the budget increase would be for any of the changes. So you can see where the increase of the budget is. We also have 44 new positions that were recommended or requested via the budget process for a total of $2.2 million. Again, if you would like to recommend that we move forward with that position, in column B is where you would select yes or no. The amount of salary and benefits for that position will populate in column A. And the total that's in A53 is what will populate on the budget worksheet. One additional step will be the two areas, or the two where we have several positions on special education, which is what Dr. Rios was talking about, the support that's needed for special education. We have a recommendation of 14 positions. If you agree with the support for special education, however you feel we should start with a lower number, let's just say 7, you change the number to 7, you select yes, and the number, that number will appear, how much it would be for 7 positions. So again, what you recommend to approve, what you recommend for us for it to be included in the budget, for instance, Laughlin would be a yes because we're moving forward with that campus. But everything that you recommend that you put a yes with will total up. This is $824,000, and here's the $824,000 under new positions. For substitutes, we had discussed, or TASB had provided us with a market median. So on the substitute page, we have the market median from TASB. This column right here are our current rates. And I have here the percentage of what our current rates are in comparison to TASB's market rates. The current substitute budget is $1.3 million. And there's several proposals that we can discuss or propose or recommend. Currently, a non-degreed short-term daily substitute rate is $58. The market median that TASB presented us is $78. So we have the option of increasing or of providing a half increase to get to the 75 to be at $66.50. So this is the half increase model, or 2/3 increase model to what TASB recommended, or a full increase where we would go from $58 to $75. So any of the models that you recommend, again, you would select the model that you recommend. Either we maintain the current rates, or you select a half increase, 2/3, or full increase to the substitute rates. And that increase that we had shared before in a board update of the budget increase for that model is what will appear on the budget total. On the salary cap, this I think would have to be a separate meeting. The very first thing I want to share with y'all is salary ranges. When we started with TASB as a salary ranges, and we started discussing that we had salary maximums, we had at that time, I believe, about 90 employees that exceeded the salary maximums. And when TASB presented to us at that time, of course, they mentioned that the ranges, of course, were going to adjust every year to the market. And what I put together here is what that adjustment looks like now. So if we were to adopt the 1.8% general pay increase with the ranges that TASB provided, there would be no teachers that exceed the maximum on the teacher pay scale. So every teacher on that scale would see at least the $1,000 adjustment that is recommended on that model. The model that they provided for, or the ranges that they provided for administrative professionals at this point would only have 9 employees that exceed that market. Their total salaries that exceed the market is $20,000. If we provided them with the, if we maximized the range so that the employees would see the same general pay increase as the other employees close to the max range are seeing, then that would cost about $12,000. The area, ooh, this computer's gonna turn off. Hold on, sorry. I'm sorry. The area, I'll hurry up. The area where we have the most employees that exceed the range is paraprofessionals. We have 38. Their salaries exceed the maximum of the ranges by 81,000. If we were to remove the cap, again, same format as I had discussed before would apply, then we would be discussing about another $20,000 increase. On the auxiliary side, there's only 6 employees that exceed the cap, the max, and their salary adds up to $9,664 that they exceed. If we were to remove the cap by adjusting the max range to allow them to receive the general pay increase that the employees that are close to the max received, that's about $2,670. So if the recommendation is to change the maximum ranges so that the employees that, I think it's, let me see. Oh gosh, this thing is in my way. 53 employees currently. If we were to adopt the 1.8% model, 53 employees currently are above the maximum range. If we were to adjust the maximum range on these models, then we would be looking at another $35,473 above the general pay increase. And I know that might need a lot more explanation, but I only had 7 minutes, but I can sit with y'all individually and review it. But I did want to start with, we started with 90 employees exceeding the maximum. And as Tasby said, that the market maximums would change, so would where those employees fell within the ranges. Now we're down to 53. Okay.
Well, if I may, Mr. Mesa,
Dr. Lucius.
obviously the purpose is not to talk
I know.
about salary caps or any of the other areas, but just to share with this interactive workbook so that we're going to send it to y'all with, obviously, with what we're going to recommend. But you can change it as you like. So that when we have the meeting, it's not news to anyone what we're basing it on. For us, this will be a tremendous tool, and for y'all, it can be just a tool to inform yourself and to be able to direct us when we finally come to make that final decision. Because at the end of the day, we're not worried about this year's budget. We know we're going to be fine, especially if we do the TRE. But we have to be cognizant of 2 things. One, how significantly the state revenue will go down the following year. And again, the need for us to allocate money for construction for the coming years. Those 2 things are critical. So we're not worried about this year's budget, but we want to plan this year's budget with next year's budget in mind. And this worksheet allows us to do that because there at the summary at the end, it shows you the effect it has on the following years. So we look forward to having a workshop just on this worksheet. And that's it for us, sir, unless there's some questions.
No, question. Mrs. Webb.
On the first page, you mentioned focused campuses, reducing the class size on focused campuses. Which campuses are we focusing on?
On the savings tab?
It says on the reclassification of GT teachers, if we were to go that route. It said something about reducing the size on focused campuses.
Yes, ma'am. That would be Calderon, North Heights, Lamar, and Garfield.
And then the next question, if we were to go that route, then I read, I guess in the update, that certain teachers, and I believe we have 76 people, I guess, certified.
GT.
Are these teachers going to be the only ones that are going to be having students that are identified GT in their classrooms, or how is that going to work?
We're starting our meetings with the principals tomorrow because the discussion is going to have, you're going to have at least 1 GT teacher per grade level. So the discussions we're going to have with them is it going to be in the rotation? So for example, let's say that you have a ELA social studies block and a reading, a math science block. Is only one of them going to be certified? Obviously, the goal would be to have both of them certified. However, we first have to meet the program needs to have somebody certified. Long-term goal would be to have everybody in that team GT certified. But to meet the legal requirements, we need to have at least one to provide the services per grade level.
And right now, we have one that services all grade levels.
Correct.
Okay. So we're actually not really going to be reducing, we're going to be adding.
Significantly
More.
adding, yes, ma'am.
So.
That's a great way to put it.
And then the other question that I had regarding the special ed teachers, because we're looking at 14 for secondary campuses and 7 for elementary. Are they going to be assigned to self-contained classrooms? Are they going to be, how are they going to be utilized?
It's going to be a combination. When we're looking at the elementary level, the elementary level right now has just one teacher. And that one teacher offers inclusion, offers resource, offers even content mastery to a certain extent. With the allocation of additional teacher, the campuses would then, in working with the special education department, would then decide if they want to have one person for resource, where there would be strictly resource, or if they want to continue with the same model. At the secondary level, we know that we need a lot more help in co-teaching. We need more help in resource and content mastery. So every campus has individual needs, but we're not saying, here's 2 more teachers, this is what they're for. It has to be based on the number of ARDs and what those ARDs call for.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mr. Contreras? Anybody?
I
Mr.
just want,
Smith?
I'm-
Ms. Gonzalez?
yes, sir. Once you're going to get everybody one of these, right? Each of us is going to get one of these worksheets.
Emailed?
That's the board members.
Yes, ma'am.
And then you're going to look at what we all put in there, and then what? You're going to look at what we all put in there, and then what? Because we're all going to have different answers.
Yes, ma'am.
Then what?
Our goal is for y'all to
Right.
use it and then give us feedback on what we've recommended. Then when we come to the workshop, we'll consider what everyone's recommended. If we need to modify our recommendations, we will at that point. If we don't modify them, that doesn't mean that's what the budget's going to be. It just means that we'll have further discussion and we'll say, how about this, that. So it's
Which workshop would that be? The next one?
yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, anyway, I appreciate this because in the past years that I've been on the board, 2 years, we got everything all at once. You know, they just lumped everything. So I appreciate the fact that we're going to get input like this. Thank you for your help with this. I mean,
It is a nice worksheet.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Smith?
It was Dr. Rose's idea after one of the meetings. I'm like, oh my God, that's right.
It was your work. Congratulations.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I'll echo that. I think it's going to be a great tool, and I appreciate the efforts putting that together, and it'll be a valuable piece for the board members. One piece that still, I still go back and keep bugging me, especially on like the new teachers. In order to get that true cost, right, and that's really what you're trying to get here, right? If you're going to hire this many teachers, it's going to cost you X, Y. But what is that benefit piece? And I think it should be there if you can add that formula in there that says, okay, right, it's going to cost us X amount for that benefit piece.
If you're referring to the health insurance,
Yeah,
workers'
whatever,
it's in
whatever.
here.
Okay.
It's
Maybe I
in
missed
column K, yes.
Maybe
If
I
you'd
missed it.
like to unhide it, it's not pretty, but it's all in there. Here's the salary and here's the benefits part of it.
You're awesome.
But-
So
but it's
forget I
there.
asked the question. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Because it does make a big difference.
I do want to reiterate that I've been on the board 10 years and I've never seen such a tool to collect the input from board members. And yeah, the budget is the most important part of the whole process of going throughout the year. It's the preparation of the budget and then, again, the input from individual board members. So this is a very awesome tool, and we're going to use it to the best of our ability. If you have any questions, you'll be getting those questions, okay?
Yes. No,
Thank you
You
very
asked for
much.
it.
At this time, we're going to adjourn the workshop portion of this meeting and go straight into the regular portion of our meeting today. The only item we have is item 11 on the agenda, curriculum and instruction. Consideration to approve the student code of conduct for adoption, the 2018-2019 student parent handbook. Dr. Garza.
Mr. Mesa, Dr. Rios, members of the board, thank you. As the previous meeting, Mrs. Webb and Mr. Chief Maldonado and myself got together to make sure that we would make some revisions to some questions that some board members had. And we did come up with some revisions. I know that on page 30, there was a statement there of they may be expelled, or the question was, shouldn't be, shall be expelled. Chief Maldonado went to chapter 37, researched that, and he did get the information, the proper information, which was shall be expelled. The other item that was in question was making sure that we inform students of taking practicum classes and also co-op classes. So the other change is on page
19.
on page 19, and the phrase that we stated there was a note that states, if a student takes a practicum or co-op class, the student will have an opportunity to earn a 5 or 6 points according to the class they're taking. For additional information, please contact your counselor. The other change that we talked about was the cell phone. I know Mrs. Webb has some questions on that, and we decided, she came up with the idea that maybe it was a good idea to, this coming year, to actually come back together with the committee and review it one more time to see if that was the proper course of action with a cell phone. And the other one was the dress code. She also had some questions on that, and we also had a committee that came up with a dress code, so she also suggested maybe we can get a committee together again and reevaluate it this coming year. Those are the only changes we made.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
Questions? Mrs. Webb.
I just want to thank Dr. Garza, Chief Maldonado, and of course, Mr. Gonzalez for getting together and making those changes, especially for the practicum and the co-op students, because we definitely want to give them all the points that they need, especially when you have top kids that might lose a scholarship or something because of 1 point. So I really appreciate your time. And of course, Chief, thank you so much for your time as well. So thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dr. Garza, would you read the recommendation?
Yes, sir. It is a recommendation of administration that the Board of Trustees approve the Student Code of Conduct for the inclusion of the 2018-2019 Student Parent Handbook as presented.
You have heard the recommendation from administration. I do entertain a motion for adoption.
So move.
Okay. Mr. Contreras, seconded by Mrs. Webb. All in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Sir. There being no other items on the agenda, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Mrs. Webb, seconded by Mrs. Gonzalez. All in favor? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a good night.